My grandson clung to my leg, crying, "Don't go, Grandpa. Mom did something bad." I thought he was playing and left anyway. My daughter-in-law had packed my bag. At the gas station, I opened it and found a heavy metal box. I took it to the police. The officer turned pale and yelled, "Drop the bag and run. This is a... I'm glad to have you here." Follow this story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Sydney, and at 65 years old, I thought I understood my family. I thought I knew the difference between a child's tantrum and genuine fear. I was wrong about everything. The morning started like any other October day. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, the familiar creak of old floorboards under my feet, and the soft murmur of the television in the living room. I had been living with my son Gregory and his wife Jolene for 2 years now, ever since Martha passed. It wasn't the retirement I had planned, but grief has a way of reshaping all your expectations. I was folding clothes in my bedroom when Alan burst through the door. My 8-year-old grandson's face was flushed red, his small chest heaving like he had run a marathon. The sight stopped me cold. "Grandpa, you can't go," he said, his voice high and strained. "Please, please don't take that suitcase." I set down the shirt I was holding and knelt to his level. Alan had always been my shadow, following me around the house, asking endless questions about everything from why grass grows to how airplanes stay in the sky. But this wasn't curiosity. This was panic. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked, reaching out to smooth his messy brown hair. "It's just a trip to spread Grandma's ashes, remember? We talked about this." His eyes filled with tears and he shook his head violently. "Mom put bad things in your bag. I saw her. She was whispering on the phone about making something happen to you." The words hit me like ice water. I glanced toward the doorway, half expecting Jolene to appear, but the hallway remained empty. Alan grabbed my arm with both hands, his fingers digging into my skin. "Grandpa, I'm not lying. She was talking to someone about making you go away forever." Before I could respond, Jolene's voice drifted down the hallway. "Alan, where are you, sweetheart?" My grandson's entire body went rigid. The terror in his eyes was so raw, so genuine that something twisted in my stomach. But what he was saying, it was impossible. Jolene had been nothing but helpful since I moved in. She cooked my favorite meals, reminded me to take my medications, always asked about my day. "Alan, honey, there you are." Jolene appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing that patient smile she always had when dealing with her son. "What are you doing bothering Grandpa, Sydney?" "He's not bothering me," I said quickly, standing up. "He's just worried about my trip." Jolene's smile tightened slightly. "Oh, Alan's been having such terrible anxiety lately. Haven't you, baby?" She moved closer, placing her hand on Alan's shoulder. I felt him flinch under her touch. "The doctor says it's completely normal for children his age," she continued, her voice taking on that practiced tone she used when discussing Alan's recent behavioral changes. "Sometimes they create elaborate stories when they're feeling overwhelmed." Alan looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Grandpa, I'm not making stories. I heard her on the phone last night. She said..." "Alan, that's enough." Jolene's voice was sharp now, though she kept her expression pleasant. "You know what we talked about regarding your imagination. Dr. Patterson said these episodes would pass if we don't encourage them." Episodes. The word sat wrong with me. 3 months ago, Alan had been a normal, happy kid. Then suddenly there were doctor visits, new medications, hushed conversations between Gregory and Jolene about behavioral issues and anxiety disorders. I watched as Jolene knelt down and pulled a small pill bottle from her pocket. "Time for your morning medicine, sweetie." "I don't want it," Alan whispered, but he was already reaching for the pill she placed in his palm. "It helps with the worried feelings, remember?" Jolene's voice was saccharine sweet as she handed him a glass of water. "Dr. Patterson says you need to take it every day so the scary thoughts go away." Something about the way she said scary thoughts made my skin crawl. I watched Alan swallow the pill with the resigned compliance of a child who had learned that resistance was futile. "There's my good boy," Jolene said, kissing his forehead. "Now, Why don't you go play in your room while Grandpa finishes packing? And remember what we discussed about bothering people with silly stories." Alan nodded, but his eyes never left mine. As he walked past me toward the door, he whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Please don't go, Grandpa. Something bad will happen." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with Jolene and the heavy silence that followed. "I'm so sorry about that," Jolene said, her voice returning to its normal, concerned tone. "The medication takes a while to work, and until then his imagination just runs wild. Gregory and I are doing everything we can to help him through this difficult phase." I nodded slowly, but something felt off. The timing bothered me. Alan's problems had started right around the time I mentioned wanting to take this trip to scatter Martha's ashes. "You know," Jolene continued, moving toward my open suitcase on the bed, "I was thinking I should help you pack. Men never remember the important things, and it's supposed to rain where you're going." "That's kind of you, but I can manage," I said, stepping closer to my bag. But Jolene was already rearranging my clothes, her movements quick and efficient. "Nonsense. It's the least I can do. You've been so good to us, letting us take care of you after Martha's passing." She folded my sweaters with practiced precision. "Besides, I want to make sure you have everything you need for such an important trip." I watched her hands move through my belongings, organizing and reorganizing. Something about her eagerness made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't pinpoint why. She had always been helpful, maybe too helpful. Sometimes I felt like I was living in her house rather than contributing to the family. "There," she said finally, zipping the suitcase closed with a satisfied smile. "All packed and ready to go. I even added some extra snacks for the drive." "Thank you," I said, though the words felt hollow. She checked her watch. "Gregory should be home from his business trip tonight, but he said to tell you to drive safely. He wishes he could be here to see you off." Gregory had been traveling more frequently for work lately. At least that's what Jolene told me. He always seemed to be leaving just when I needed to talk to him, always too busy for the long conversations we used to have. I missed my son, missed the easy relationship we'd had before I moved in with them. "I should get going," I said, lifting the suitcase from the bed. It felt heavier than I remembered, but I attributed that to Jolene's extra snacks. As I walked toward the front door, I could hear Alan in his room. Not playing, not laughing, just an eerie silence that seemed to permeate the entire house. I paused at his doorway, seeing him sitting on his bed, staring at his hands. "Bye, buddy," I called softly. "I'll be back in 3 days." He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in his expression that I would replay in my mind for weeks to come. It wasn't sadness or even worry. It was resignation. The look of a child who had tried to warn someone they loved and had been ignored. "Bye, Grandpa," he whispered. "I love you." Those words followed me to the car, where Jolene stood waiting with a bright smile and a thermos of coffee for the road. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Alan's face in his bedroom window, pressed against the glass, watching me leave. If I had listened to him that morning, if I had paid attention to the fear in his eyes instead of dismissing it as childhood anxiety, everything that happened next could have been avoided. But sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who blind us to the truth that children see so clearly. I had no idea that in my suitcase, carefully hidden beneath the clothes Jolene had so lovingly packed, was something that would change our family forever. The drive to Blue Ridge Lake usually took 3 hours, but I had planned to take my time, making stops along the way to process what I was about to do. Spreading Martha's ashes felt like the final goodbye I hadn't been ready for when she passed. Even 3 years later, part of me still expected to find her waiting in our old kitchen when I came home. I had driven for about an hour when my stomach started bothering me. The coffee Jolene had given me tasted bitter, leaving an odd aftertaste that lingered no matter how much water I drank. I pulled into a small gas station off Highway 35, one of those family-owned places that still had full service and a friendly wave from the owner. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of burning leaves and the promise of winter. I filled my tank and decided to reorganize my suitcase, maybe grab some antacids from inside the station. My stomach was churning in a way that had nothing to do with grief. I popped the trunk and unzipped my bag, looking for the small travel pharmacy I always carried. Martha used to tease me about it, calling me her walking drugstore. But after 65 years, you learn that a little preparation goes a long way. That's when I felt it. Something hard and heavy wrapped in my blue sweater, the one Martha had knitted for my 60th birthday. My fingers traced the outline of whatever was beneath the wool, and my blood ran cold. This wasn't anything I had packed. With trembling hands, I unwrapped the sweater, revealing a metal container about the size of a shoebox. It was crudely welded, with wires protruding from one end and what looked like a timer attached to the top. Even with my limited knowledge of such things, I knew immediately that this wasn't supposed to be in my luggage. I stepped back from the car, my heart hammering against my ribs. The parking lot suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. A few other customers were pumping gas, going about their normal Saturday routines, completely unaware of what I had just discovered. My hands shook as I pulled out my cell phone, but who do you call in a situation like this? 911 seemed dramatic, but what if I was overreacting? What if this was some kind of elaborate joke, though I couldn't imagine who would find this funny or why? Then I remembered Alan's face, the terror in his eyes when he begged me not to go, the way he had whispered about his mother putting bad things in my bag, the medication that made him compliant and quiet, the stories Jolene dismissed as imagination. My grandson hadn't been lying. I looked around the gas station and spotted an older man in work clothes filling up a pickup truck. Something about his posture, the way he carried himself, reminded me of the veterans I had known over the years. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice more steady than I felt. "Could I ask you something?" He looked up, his weathered face friendly but alert. "Sure thing. What can I help you with?" I gestured toward my open trunk, keeping my voice low. "I found something in my luggage that I didn't pack, and I'm not sure what it is. Would you mind taking a look?" His expression immediately became more serious. "What kind of something?" "Metal box, wires, looks like it has some kind of timer on it." The man's face went pale. He was beside me in 3 quick strides, looking into my suitcase without touching anything. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. "Sir, we need to get everyone away from here right now," he said quietly. "I did 2 tours in Afghanistan, and that looks like an improvised explosive device." The words hit me like a physical blow. Explosive device. Someone had put something dangerous in my luggage, something that could have hurt innocent people, someone who knew I would be driving alone on empty highways, stopping at small places like this. "Are you sure?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "Sure enough that we need to call the police immediately and clear this area." He was already walking toward the station, motioning for other customers to move their cars. "Sir, you need to step away from your vehicle and call 911. My fingers fumbled with my phone as the reality of the situation crashed over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a cruel joke. Someone had tried to hurt me, and that someone was living in my house, cooking my meals, caring for my grandson. The police arrived within 15 minutes, followed by what seemed like half the county's emergency services. A bomb disposal expert confirmed what the veteran had suspected. The device was real, functional, and set to activate within the next 2 hours. I sat in the back of a police cruiser, watching through the window as men in protective suits carefully examined my belongings. Everything I had packed for this trip, every memento I was bringing to honor Martha's memory, was now evidence in a criminal investigation. Detective Maria Santos, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, sat down across from me in the station's interview room an hour later. She had a thick file in her hands and an expression that told me this conversation was going to change everything. "Mr. Holloway," she began, her voice gentle but serious, "we need to talk about who had access to your luggage and when it was packed." I told her everything I could remember about the morning, Jolene's insistence on helping me pack, the way she had rearranged my belongings, Alan's desperate pleas for me not to go. With each detail, Detective Santos's expression grew more grim. "Tell me about your daughter-in-law," she said. "Has she exhibited any unusual behavior lately? Money problems, strange phone calls, people coming to the house you didn't recognize?" That's when the pieces started falling into place. The hushed conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The way Jolene always seemed to be managing the household finances, telling Gregory and me that she had everything under control. The visitors she claimed were friends from work who never stayed long enough for proper introductions. There have been some financial discussions, I admitted. Jolene mentioned that things were tight, that my moving in had helped with expenses. She handles most of the bills since Gregory travels so much for work. Detective Santos made notes, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mr. Holloway, we're going to need to investigate this thoroughly. That means looking into your family's financial situation, phone records, any insurance policies that might be involved. Insurance policies. The words made my stomach drop even further. I thought about the life insurance Martha and I had maintained, the benefits that would transfer to Gregory as my heir. I thought about the house Martha had left me, the one I had been considering selling to help with my living expenses. Detective, I said slowly. My grandson tried to warn me this morning. He said his mother had put bad things in my bag, that she was planning something to make me go away forever. We thought he was having anxiety issues, imagination problems. She leaned forward. Has the child been exhibiting other signs of distress? Changes in behavior, sleep problems, regression in any areas? He's been on medication for anxiety for the past 3 months, I said. His mother says he's been having episodes making up stories. But now you're wondering if he was telling the truth all along. I nodded, feeling sick. If someone was willing to do this to me, what might they do to a child who was trying to expose them? Detective Santos closed her file and stood up. Mr. Holloway, we're going to need you to stay away from your son's house until we can investigate this properly. Is there somewhere safe you can stay? I thought about Alan, probably wondering where I was, maybe being told that I had decided not to come back. I thought about Gregory, who was supposed to return from his business trip tonight to find his father missing and his wife under investigation. But mostly I thought about my brave little grandson who had tried to save my life and hadn't been believed by the one person who should have protected him. Detective, I said, my voice stronger than it had been all day. I want to help you catch whoever did this, and I want to make sure my grandson is safe. She nodded. We're going to do everything we can, Mr. Holloway, but I need you to understand that this investigation is going to turn your family's life upside down. I looked out the window of the police station at the darkening sky, thinking about Alan sleeping in a house with someone who was capable of unthinkable things. Someone who had been trusted with the care of the people I loved most. Detective, I said quietly, my family's life was already upside down. We just didn't know it yet. I spent that night in a hotel room 30 miles from home, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything Detective Santos had told me. The investigation was moving quickly, she said, because the evidence was so clear. Phone records, financial documents, digital trails that painted a picture I never could have imagined. But it wasn't until the next morning, when she called to ask me to come back to the station, that I learned just how deep the deception ran. Mr. Holloway, Detective Santos said, gesturing for me to sit down across from her desk. We've uncovered some information about your daughter-in-law's activities that you need to know about. She opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Bank statements, printouts of online transactions, and what looked like insurance paperwork. The sight of it all made my stomach turn. Jolene has been living a double life, the detective began. For the past 18 months, she's been involved in online gambling. High-stakes poker games, sports betting, cryptocurrency investments that went bad. She's accumulated debts totaling approximately $150,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $150,000. That was more money than Gregory made in 2.5 years. How had she hidden something like that? But that's not all, Detective Santos continued. She's been systematically taking out loans and credit cards using your personal information and Gregory's. She forged signatures, used your social security number, created false documents showing income that doesn't exist. I felt dizzy. How is that possible? I never signed anything. Identity theft is easier than most people realize, especially when the perpetrator has access to all your personal documents. She pulled out another sheet of paper. This is a life insurance policy taken out on you 6 months ago. $500,000 with Jolene listed as the primary beneficiary. My hand started shaking. But Gregory is my son. He should be. That's what we thought too. But look at this signature. She pointed to the bottom of the page. It was supposed to be mine, but the handwriting was slightly off, the way someone writes when they're copying rather than signing naturally. She forged my signature? Multiple times. Insurance policies, loan applications, even a will that would have superseded any existing estate planning you've done. Detective Santos leaned back in her chair. Mr. Holloway, if her plan had worked, Jolene would have inherited everything. Your pension, your wife's life insurance payout, the house Martha left you, everything. I thought about Martha's house, the little blue cottage we had shared for 37 years. The one I had been considering selling to help with expenses, to contribute more to Gregory and Jolene's household. The house that held every memory of my marriage, every moment of happiness I had built with the woman I loved. There's more, the detective said gently. We've been monitoring phone calls and discovered that Jolene has been in contact with several individuals with criminal backgrounds. Loan sharks, essentially. People who don't accept late payments or excuses. You mean she borrowed money from dangerous people? Exactly. And when she couldn't pay them back, they started threatening her family. Your family. Detective Santos pulled out a transcript of a phone call. This conversation took place 3 nights ago, the night before you were supposed to leave for your trip. I read the words on the page, and each one made me feel sicker. I told you I'll have the money by Monday. No, I can't get it from my husband. He doesn't know about any of this. Yes, I understand what happens if I don't pay. I have a plan, okay? There's going to be an accident this weekend, and the insurance will cover everything. She was planning to use I couldn't finish the sentence. Yes. And she had been setting up the situation for months. Isolating you from your son, making sure Gregory was traveling more frequently, establishing a pattern of your declining mental health. What do you mean, declining mental health? Detective Santos pulled out medical records. Jolene has been taking Alan to a psychiatrist, claiming that you've been having episodes of confusion, memory loss, inappropriate behavior around the child. She was building a case that you were becoming unstable, possibly dangerous. The room started spinning. But that's not true. I've never. We know. Alan's therapist, Dr. Margaret Chen, contacted us this morning. She said she had been concerned about the inconsistencies in Jolene's reports versus what she observed during her sessions with Alan. Children don't lie about fear, Mr. Holloway. Dr. Chen could see that Alan was terrified, but not of you. He was scared of his mother. Yes. And when Dr. Chen started asking more direct questions about the home environment, Jolene suddenly decided that Alan no longer needed therapy. She canceled all future appointments 2 weeks ago. I buried my face in my hands. All those months of watching Alan become more withdrawn, more anxious, more compliant. The medications that made him sleepy and quiet. The way he would flinch when Jolene entered the room. Detective, I said, looking up. My grandson has been trying to protect me this whole time, hasn't he? She nodded. Children see things adults miss because they're not clouded by assumptions about who people are supposed to be. Alan knew his mother was planning something terrible, but every time he tried to tell someone, he was dismissed as anxious or imaginative. Where is he now? Is he safe? He's with Child Protective Services temporarily. We couldn't leave him in the house while we executed the search warrant. Gregory was contacted at his hotel in Chicago and is driving back as we speak. Gregory. My son, who had been manipulated just as much as I had, who thought he was married to a woman struggling with financial stress, not someone capable of elaborate schemes and dangerous plans. How much does Gregory know? I asked. We spoke with him briefly over the phone. He was. Shock doesn't begin to cover it. He had no idea about the gambling, the debts, the forged documents. He thought Jolene was managing their finances responsibly. Detective Santos closed the folder and looked at me with something like sympathy. Mr. Holloway, there's something else you need to know. When we searched your house this morning, we found evidence that Jolene has been drugging you. Drugging me? Small amounts of sedatives in your coffee, your food. Nothing that would be immediately noticeable, but enough to make you more compliant, more trusting, less likely to question things that seemed off. I thought about all those mornings when I felt unusually tired, the afternoons when I couldn't quite focus on conversations, the way I had started accepting Jolene's explanations for things without pushing back. I had attributed it to aging, to grief, to the normal adjustments of living in someone else's home. She was controlling my ability to think clearly? It appears so. The substances we found are the same ones she was giving to Alan, just in different dosages. She was managing both of you, keeping you both just confused enough to not interfere with her plans. A cold rage started building in my chest. This woman had been poisoning my grandson. She had been systematically destroying my family while pretending to care for us. And she had almost succeeded. "Detective Santos," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What happens now?" "Now we arrest Jolene Patterson on charges of attempted harm, fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. The district attorney believes we have enough evidence for a conviction that will put her away for a very long time." I thought about Alan, probably scared and confused, wondering where everyone was, and why his world had suddenly changed. I thought about Gregory driving through the night to come home to a reality he never could have imagined. "When can I see my grandson?" "We're hoping to arrange that later today. Dr. Chen has agreed to be present to help Alan process what's happening. He's going to need a lot of support to understand that none of this was his fault." As I left the police station that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. The fog that had been clouding my judgment. The fatigue that had been slowing my thoughts. The general sense of confusion that I had blamed on age and grief. All of it had been artificially induced by someone I had trusted. But more than that, I felt a fierce determination to make things right for Alan. My brave little grandson had tried to save my life, and in return I was going to make sure he never had to live in fear again. The truth was finally coming to light, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead of us. Rebuilding trust, healing trauma, and helping a child understand that the world could be safe again when the people who were supposed to protect him had failed so completely. Alan had been the guardian of my innocence, and now it was my turn to guard his. The Child Advocacy Center was nothing like I had expected. Instead of sterile government offices, it looked more like someone's comfortable home, with soft couches, warm lighting, and children's artwork on the walls. Dr. Margaret Chen met me at the entrance, a gentle woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Holloway," she said, extending her hand, "Alan has been asking for you constantly. He's been very worried about whether you're safe." The words broke something inside me. Even after everything he had endured, my grandson's first concern was for my well-being. How is he? Has he been able to sleep? He's been anxious, but not in the way his mother described in our previous sessions. This is situational anxiety, completely normal given what he's been through. The child I've been working with these past few months is nothing like the troubled boy Jolene depicted. Dr. Chen led me down a hallway lined with cheerful artwork. "I need to prepare you for what you might see and hear today. Alan has been carrying some very heavy secrets, and now that he feels safe to tell the truth, everything is going to come out." She paused outside a door painted to look like a rainbow. "He's been drawing pictures while we've been talking. Sometimes children express things through art that they can't say with words." When the door opened, Alan looked up from a small table where he was coloring. The moment he saw me, he dropped his crayon and ran across the room, throwing his arms around my waist and holding on like he was afraid I might disappear. "Grandpa, you're okay. You didn't get hurt." He buried his face against my shirt and I could feel him trembling. I knelt down to his level and looked into his eyes that seemed older than they should have been for an 8-year-old boy. "I'm fine, buddy. And you were so brave to try to warn me. You probably saved my life." Alan's lower lip quivered. "I tried to tell you, but nobody believed me. Mom said I was making up stories again." "I believe you now," I said, smoothing his hair back from his face. "I'm sorry I didn't listen the first time. Can you tell me what you saw? What made you so scared? Dr. Chen settled into a chair nearby, her presence calming and reassuring. Alan looked at her, then back at me as if making sure it was really okay to talk. Mom has been doing bad things for a long time, he said quietly. She talks on the phone when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I hear her. She was always angry about money and saying mean things about you and Daddy. What kind of mean things? Alan's voice got even smaller. She said you were too old and taking up space. She said Daddy was stupid and didn't know how to handle money. She said if you weren't around anymore, everything would be easier. I felt my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. When did you first hear her say things like that? A long time ago. Maybe after Christmas last year. She started having people come to the house when Daddy was traveling. Scary people who talked loud and made her cry. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Alan, can you tell your grandfather about the pictures you've been drawing? Alan nodded and went back to the table, returning with a stack of drawings. The first one showed our house, but there were dark figures standing outside. The second showed a woman who looked like Jolene talking on a phone while a small figure, presumably Alan, hid behind a doorway. But it was the third drawing that made my blood run cold. It showed a car on a road, and there was an explosion drawn in bright red and orange crayon. Mom was on the phone talking about making something happen to your car, Alan said, his voice barely above a whisper. She said there would be an accident, and then the money problems would be solved. Did she know you could hear these conversations? Alan shook his head. I was good at being quiet, but sometimes she would catch me listening, and that's when she would get really mad. She said I was imagining things and that I needed medicine to make the bad thoughts stop. Dr. Chen spoke up. Alan, can you tell your grandfather about the medicine? It made me sleepy all the time, Alan said, and it made it hard to think about things. Mom said it would help me not worry so much, but I was worried because I knew she was planning to hurt you. I thought about all those afternoons when Alan seemed unusually drowsy, when his normally bright personality seemed dimmed. I had assumed it was normal childhood development or adjustment to having me in the house. The medicine made it harder to tell people what I heard, Alan continued. Like the words would get stuck in my head and I couldn't make them come out right. That's why Mom liked it when I took it. What about your daddy? Did you ever try to tell him what you heard? Alan's face fell. Daddy was never home anymore, and when he was home, Mom would be really nice and act normal. She would cook special dinners and be happy, and Daddy would say how lucky we were to have such a good mom. The manipulation was staggering. Jolene had been orchestrating every interaction, controlling every narrative, making sure that Alan's attempts to communicate the truth would be dismissed as childhood anxiety or the side effects of medication. Alan, I said gently, the morning I left for my trip you tried so hard to warn me. That was incredibly brave. I saw her putting something in your suitcase, he said, something heavy that she wrapped up in your sweater. She was being very careful with it like it was dangerous, and I heard her on the phone that night saying, "It's all set for tomorrow. Why didn't you try to take it out of my suitcase?" Alan looked down at his hands. I tried, but she caught me. She said if I ever went through people's things again, she would send me away to live with strangers. She said you and Daddy wouldn't want me anymore because I was becoming a bad kid who tells lies. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Jolene had isolated Alan emotionally just as thoroughly as she had isolated me mentally. She had made him afraid to trust his own perceptions, afraid to seek help, afraid that telling the truth would result in losing the people he loved most. Alan, Dr. Chen said softly, you know now that none of that was true, right? You're not a bad kid, and you don't tell lies. You were trying to protect your grandfather. He nodded, but I could see the uncertainty still lingering in his eyes. The damage Jolene had done would take time to heal. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Dr. Chen stepped out for a moment, and I could hear quiet voices in the hallway. When she returned, she was followed by Gregory. My son looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled from the long drive, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and shock. But when he saw Alan, his face crumpled with relief. "Alan," he said, his voice breaking. "Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry." Alan ran to his father and Gregory scooped him up in a fierce hug. "Daddy, I tried to tell people, but nobody believed me." "I believe you now," Gregory whispered. "I believe every word, and I'm never going to let anyone hurt you or Grandpa again." Gregory looked at me over Alan's head, and I saw something in his expression that I had missed for months. Clarity. The fog of manipulation had lifted for him too, and he was seeing our family situation with fresh eyes. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected both of you." "You couldn't have known," I said. "She fooled all of us." But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Alan had known. Children have an intuition that adults often lose, an ability to sense danger even when they can't articulate what they're feeling. Dr. Chen cleared her throat gently. "I think this is enough for today. Alan has been very brave, and he needs some time to process everything that's happening. But I want you both to know that he's going to be okay. Children are resilient, and with the right support, he'll recover from this." As we prepared to leave, Alan tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, are you going to come live with us again?" I looked at Gregory, and he nodded immediately. "Of course he is. We're going to be a real family now, buddy. No more secrets, no more lies, no more being scared." Walking out of the Child Advocacy Center with my son and grandson, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The truth had finally come to light, thanks to the courage of a little boy who refused to stop trying to protect the people he loved. Alan had saved my life, but more than that, he had saved our family, and now it was our turn to save his childhood, to give him back the security and innocence that had been stolen from him by someone who was supposed to love and protect him. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there to see it, but Detective Santos called to let me know that Jolene had been taken into custody at her workplace, a small accounting firm where she had been embezzling money for the past 8 months. Even there, surrounded by numbers and financial records, she had been living a lie. Gregory, Alan, and I were staying at my old house, Martha's house, the little blue cottage that Jolene had tried to claim through forged documents. It felt strange being back in the rooms where Martha and I had shared 37 years of marriage, but it also felt like coming home. Alan had taken immediately to the place, exploring every corner with the curiosity that had been suppressed for so long. "Grandpa, why do you have so many pictures of Grandma Martha?" he asked that morning, standing in front of the mantel where dozens of photographs chronicled our life together. "Because she was the most important person in my world," I told him. "And now that she's gone, the pictures help me remember all the happy times we had." Alan studied one particular photo, Martha and me on our 25th wedding anniversary, both of us laughing at something I couldn't even remember now. "Do you think she would have liked me?" The question broke my heart. "Alan, she would have loved you more than anything in the world. She always wanted grandchildren." Gregory looked up from the legal documents he was reviewing at the kitchen table. We had spent the past 3 days sorting through the financial mess Jolene had created, trying to understand the full scope of her deception. The forged loans alone totaled nearly $200,000. "Dad," Gregory said, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "the lawyer thinks we can get most of this straightened out. The banks will have to eat the losses on the fraudulent accounts, and your credit can be restored once we prove identity theft." But I knew that money was the least of our problems. The real damage was emotional, psychological. Alan still flinched sometimes when unexpected sounds came from outside. Gregory hadn't slept through the night since learning the truth about his wife. And me? I was still processing the fact that someone had tried to erase me from existence while pretending to care for me. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Detective Santos had explained that Jolene would likely plead not guilty and try to claim that everything had been a misunderstanding, that she had been acting under duress from the people she owed money to. But the evidence was overwhelming. "Will I have to testify?" Alan asked when Dr. Chen came by for our regular session. She had been helping him process everything that had happened, and slowly, His natural personality was emerging from beneath the fog of medication and fear. "You might," Dr. Chen said gently. "But if you do, there will be people there to help you, and you'll only have to tell the truth. Nothing more than that." Alan nodded solemnly. "I want to tell the truth. Mom always said I wasn't supposed to, but I want to." That afternoon, while Alan was taking a nap, Gregory and I sat on the back porch of Martha's house, watching the October leaves fall in the yard where she had planted her garden. It was the first time we had really talked, just father and son, in over 2 years. "I should have seen it," Gregory said for the 100th time. The signs were all there. Her mood swings, the way she always had explanations for everything, how she kept me traveling more and more. "She was very good at what she did," I replied. "She fooled trained professionals, Gregory. She had Dr. Patterson convinced that Alan was having serious behavioral problems. She had the bank convinced that she had my permission for all those transactions. But I'm his father. I should have protected him." I looked at my son, seeing the guilt eating away at him. "You know what Alan told me yesterday? He said that even when he was scared of his mother, he never stopped believing that his daddy loved him. That kept him going, Gregory. That gave him the strength to keep trying to warn us." Gregory's eyes filled with tears. "I miss so much. His first loose tooth, the school play where he had 3 lines as a tree, the night he had that bad dream and wanted his daddy, but I was in Phoenix on a business trip that probably wasn't even necessary. But you're here now," I said. "And that's what matters." The truth was, we were all learning how to be a family again. Real conversations instead of the carefully managed interactions Jolene had orchestrated. Meals where we actually talked instead of sitting in the strained silence that had become normal. Bedtime stories for Alan without the anxiety medication that had kept him compliant and drowsy. It was during one of these bedtime stories that Alan asked the question I had been dreading. "Grandpa, is my mom going to come back?" I looked at Gregory, who nodded for me to answer honestly. We had decided that Alan deserved the truth, age-appropriate but complete. "Your mother made some very serious mistakes," I said carefully. "She hurt people and broke laws, and when adults do that, they have to face consequences. She's going to have to stay in a place where she can't hurt anyone for a long time." "Will she be in jail?" "Yes, she will." Alan was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, he said, "Is it bad that I'm not sad about that?" "No, buddy, it's not bad. You're allowed to feel however you feel. Your mother scared you and made you feel unsafe. It's normal to feel relieved when someone who hurt you can't hurt you anymore. But she's still my mom. She is. And someday when you're older, you might want to talk to someone about what that means for you. But right now your job is just to be a kid and feel safe." The trial proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. Jolene's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney's office was pushing for serious charges given the premeditated nature of her actions and the involvement of a child. The attempted harm charges alone carried a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years. During one of the pretrial conferences, Detective Santos pulled Gregory and me aside. "Jolene is claiming that she never intended for anyone to actually get hurt," she said. "Her story is that she was just trying to scare Sydney into giving her access to his finances willingly, that the device was never meant to actually function." "But it was functional," I said. "The bomb squad confirmed that." "We know. And we have recordings of her phone calls discussing the timing and location to maximize impact. But she's going to try to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, a desperate mother who made poor choices under pressure." Gregory shook his head. "She drugged her own child. She isolated my father from his family. She forged documents for months. That's not desperation, that's calculated cruelty." "We agree," Detective Santos said. "And we believe the jury will too. But I want you to be prepared for her to try to manipulate the narrative one more time." When the day came for Alan's testimony, the courtroom had been arranged to be as child-friendly as possible. Alan sat with Dr. D. Chen, who had been approved as a support person, and answered questions in a clear, steady voice that belied his 8 years. "Alan," the prosecutor asked gently, "when you tried to warn your grandfather not to go on his trip, what did you think would happen if he didn't listen?" I thought my mom would hurt him, Alan said simply. She had put something dangerous in his suitcase and she was talking on the phone about making sure he wouldn't come back. Were you afraid of your mother? Yes. She gave me medicine that made me sleepy and made it hard to think. She said if I told people the things I heard her saying, nobody would believe me because I was just a little kid with problems. From across the courtroom, I could see Jolene sitting with her lawyer, her expression carefully composed. She looked like any suburban mother, well-dressed and concerned. But I knew now that appearances meant nothing. The most dangerous people often looked the most normal. The verdict came back after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on all major charges. Jolene was sentenced to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 12. She would also be required to pay full restitution for the financial fraud, though the lawyer explained that we would likely never see most of that money. As we left the courthouse that final day, Alan slipped his hand into mine. Is it over now, Grandpa? Yes, buddy, it's over. And for the first time in almost a year, I believed that was true. Jolene's hold over our family was broken. Her ability to manipulate and control was gone, and we were finally free to rebuild our lives based on truth instead of lies. The healing would take time, I knew. Alan would need ongoing therapy to process the trauma of living with someone who had used his love and trust as weapons against him. Gregory would need to forgive himself for not seeing what was happening, and I would need to learn to trust my instincts again, to believe in my own perceptions instead of doubting everything I thought I knew. But we had something Jolene had tried to destroy, each other. And with that foundation, I believed we could build something stronger than what we had lost. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of Martha's house, our house now, watching Alan help Gregory make pancakes for Sunday breakfast. It had become our tradition, this weekly ritual of chaos and laughter that bore no resemblance to the quiet, tense meals we had shared when Jolene was orchestrating every interaction. Grandpa, Dad's putting chocolate chips in the batter again, Alan announced with mock disapproval, though he was grinning from ear to ear. It's Sunday, Gregory defended himself, flour dusting his shirt. Sunday pancakes are supposed to be special. Alan had grown 3 inches in the past year and gained back the bright curiosity that medication had dulled. His laugh came easily now, and the shadows that had lived behind his eyes were gone. Doctor, Chen said his recovery had been remarkable. But I knew the truth. Children heal when they feel safe, and Alan finally felt safe. Gregory had changed too. He had quit the traveling sales job that had kept him away from home so much. A job that Jolene had encouraged him to take to keep him away from what was really happening in his own house. Now he worked for a local construction company, home every evening for dinner and bedtime stories. Dad, he had said one evening a few months after the trial, I want Alan to grow up knowing that his father is present, not just providing. I miss too much already. We had all learned to be present in ways we never had before. Real conversations over meals. Alan's homework spread across the kitchen table while Gregory and I helped with math problems and spelling words. Family movie nights where we actually watched the movie instead of sitting in separate rooms with our own screens. The house itself had been transformed too. Alan's artwork covered the refrigerator and hallway walls. His bicycle was permanently parked in the garage next to the fishing poles we used for our Saturday morning trips to Miller's Pond. Gregory had built a workshop in the basement where he restored old furniture, and Alan helped by holding tools and asking approximately 1,000 questions per hour. Are we really going to live here forever? Alan had asked one evening while we were reading together in Martha's old rocking chair. Do you want to? I asked. Yeah, it feels like home now. Home. It was a word that had lost meaning during those months when we were all walking on eggshells, when normal family interactions felt strained and artificial. But somehow, in rebuilding our relationships from the ground up, we had found something better than what we had lost. The financial recovery had taken longer than the emotional one. It took 8 months to clean up the fraudulent accounts and restore my credit rating. The house Jolene and Gregory had been renting was sold, and Gregory had moved permanently into Martha's house with me and Alan. At 66, I was learning what it meant to be not just a grandfather, but an active parent figure again. It's like having my childhood back, Alan told Dr. Chen during one of his final therapy sessions, but with better snacks. We had maintained the Saturday sessions even after Alan no longer needed them for trauma processing. Dr. Chen said it was important for him to have a neutral space to talk about his feelings, and I thought it was important for him to know that mental health support was normal and healthy, not something to be ashamed of. The anniversary of Jolene's arrest passed quietly. We didn't mark it or discuss it, but I think we all felt the weight of how different our lives had become in just 12 months. Alan was thriving in school, making friends easily, and bringing home stories of playground adventures and classroom jokes. Gregory was coaching Alan's little league team and attending every school event he had missed during the years of business travel. And me? I was learning to trust my instincts again. When something felt off, I paid attention instead of dismissing my concerns. When Alan seemed upset about something, I listened instead of assuming he was being dramatic. When Gregory looked stressed, I asked direct questions instead of hoping someone else would handle it. We had learned, all three of us, that family members don't have to manage each other's emotions or walk around each other's sensitivities. We could be honest about our feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. I still get angry sometimes, Alan told me one evening while we were working on a jigsaw puzzle, about Mom and what she did. That's okay, I said. Anger is a normal feeling when someone hurts you. Dr. Chen says it's okay to be mad at someone and still love them at the same time. Dr. Chen is right. You can love your mother and still be angry about the choices she made. Those feelings don't cancel each other out. Alan nodded thoughtfully, fitting a puzzle piece into place. I think maybe I'll write her a letter someday. Not now, but when I'm older and I know what to say. That sounds like a good plan. We had received 2 letters from Jolene during her first year in prison. Gregory had read them first, then decided they were manipulative attempts to rewrite history and hadn't shared them with Alan. She was seeking sympathy, painting herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control, and suggesting that she had been trying to protect the family from financial ruin. She's still lying, Gregory had said after reading the second letter. Even now, even after everything, she can't take responsibility for what she did. I wasn't surprised. People who are capable of the level of manipulation Jolene had maintained don't suddenly develop insight and accountability just because they face consequences, but her inability to change didn't affect our ability to heal. On the 2nd anniversary of Martha's passing, Alan helped me plant a small garden in the backyard. We chose flowers that bloomed at different times throughout the year, so there would always be something beautiful growing in the space Martha had loved. Do you think Grandma Martha would be proud of us? Alan asked as we patted soil around the bulbs that would become daffodils in the spring. I looked at our little family, Gregory building a tree swing in the old oak tree, Alan with dirt under his fingernails and joy in his eyes, the house alive with warmth and laughter again. I think she would be amazed by how strong and brave you are, I told him, and I think she would be proud that we found our way back to each other. That evening, after Alan was asleep and Gregory was reading in the living room, I sat in Martha's rocking chair and thought about the journey that had brought us to this place. A year and a half ago, I had been a lonely widower living in someone else's house, slowly losing my sense of self under the influence of drugs I didn't know I was taking. Alan had been a frightened child whose attempts to protect his family were dismissed as behavioral problems. Gregory had been a man so manipulated that he couldn't see the truth about his own wife and son. Now we were something none of us had expected to become. A family unit that worked. Not perfect, not without occasional disagreements or difficult moments, but honest and safe and real. Alan's courage had saved us all. His refusal to stop trying to warn me, even when it cost him dearly, had ultimately exposed the truth that set us free. He had been the guardian of my innocence, protecting me from dangers I couldn't see. And in return, Gregory and I were determined to guard his childhood and make sure he never had to carry such heavy burdens alone again. As I prepared for bed that night, I found a note Alan had left on my nightstand. Grandpa, thank you for listening to me when it mattered. Love.